Hi guys, welcome back. This is a continuation of my previous video on allocative efficiency. So if you remember in our previous episode, this was where we left off, where we showed that firms with market dominance, they are allocatively inefficient because they're producing at a quantity Q where P is bigger than MC. So in this episode, we will show how these firms actually causes market failure. In other words, allocative inefficiency actually leads to market failure. So how do we show that? From this diagram, we actually need to figure out where's the perfectly competitive price and quantity. To do that, we need to assume that the upward sloping portion of the MC curve is actually the market supply of a perfectly competitive market, and the market demand of a perfectly competitive market is still given by the demand curve. So with that, the perfectly competitive price and quantity will be established where demand cuts supply, and that is at PC and at PC. So we see that for the perfectly competitive market, they are actually charging a lower price and producing a higher quantity as compared to the firm with market dominance. Okay, so let's try and see how much is the consumer and producer surplus in the PC market. Now, if you remember, consumer surplus is the difference between the maximum price that consumers are willing to pay and the price that they're actually paying. The maximum price that consumers are willing to pay is given by the demand curve, and the price that they're actually paying is given by the market price, which means that for the perfectly competitive market, the consumer surplus is given by the yellow triangle. The producer surplus, on the other hand, is the difference between the minimum price that producers are prepared to receive, which is given by the supply curve, and the price they actually received, which is given by the market price. Okay, and this means that the producer surplus in a perfectly competitive market is given by the blue area. Now let's compare the consumer and producer surplus in the PC market as compared to a market where there is a dominant firm. Now if there is a dominant firm, the dominant firm is charging a price of P and producing a quantity of Q. This means that the consumer surplus is actually now smaller and given by the pink triangle. Now, for producer surplus in a market with a dominant firm, it's a little bit more difficult to deduce, but it still can be done. So if you remember, producer surplus is the difference between the price the producer receives and the minimum price they are prepared to receive. Okay, so the producer surplus in a market with a dominant firm is actually given by this area, the difference between the price that they received, which is given by the market price of P, and the minimum price, which is given by their MC curve, up until the output that they're actually producing, which is Q. So one thing that you notice about the combined consumer and producer surplus in a market with a dominant firm is that it's definitely smaller as compared to that in a PC market. And the area that is lost, this black area, is known as the deadweight loss. Okay, and we say that this deadweight loss comes about because society's welfare is not maximized. Society wants a quantity of QPC in order to maximize its welfare, but only Q has been produced. There is underproduction. So when do you need to go through this analysis? When the question specifically asks you how market dominance leads to market failure. This diagram is crucial and must form part of your explanation.